Hey everyone, Jason from Alphatone Audio back again, and today I'm going to build an insert cable. Now some people call these Y cables, and I don't really agree with that terminology. When I say insert cable, there's basically two main applications that you would normally use these on. One is in prosumer mixers, where it literally enables you to insert another piece of gear into the channel strip. It's usually directly right after the preamp and before the EQ, but some will do it after the EQ, or they will give you a switch that you can move it, pre or post EQ. The second one, and what I'm really going to focus on today, is more for a pedal board build. There are at least two major manufacturers that instead of, they use stereo pedals, but instead of having separate left and right plugs on the pedals in order to save cost and space, they just use a single TRS jack, and then you build these insert cables and allows you to split it out. So it's really more of a stereo cable in this case than an insert cable. The two of them, like I said, the Strymons on the input side, those are normally a single TRS jack, and they use separate left and right on the outputs. And also the RJM loop switchers on their stereo loops, they will use single TRS jacks for both the input and the output. And there's nothing wrong with it as long as you can get your hands on one of these. And I'm going to show you how to do one for yourself today. And just one thing about this, some people will call this a Y cable, and I don't believe that there really is a Y cable. For me, a Y cable is a splitter cable, which actually takes one source and splits it into two, and you're generally splitting and you're not combining in a passive cable. So this is definitely what we're going to be calling an insert or a stereo cable. The two main components I'm going to use is I have two pieces of Mogami 2314 here. Again, just single conductor, unbalanced cable, and I've already got these stripped back 3/4 of an inch. And I'm going to use the Switchcraft 236 TRS right angle. This is my favorite for pedal boards, I think. Outside of the pedal board, like on pedal board snakes, that kind of thing, I do like the Neutrix NP2RXs just because they're heavier duty and I like those for stage use. But inside the pedal board, I find that these are the best ones because they have a large exit hole that it makes it easy to get two individual cables in there. But overall, the plug is still pretty small. And I haven't found a unit with a jack density so tight I couldn't get two of these side by side. And also because the barrel is kind of short, if the jack ends up being kind of close to the bottom of the unit, you can usually just kind of rotate it like 45 degrees so it doesn't literally hit the top of the pedal board, and you can still get as many of these as you need side by side, consecutive jacks. So I like the 236s for this. A little bit expensive, but I think ultimately it is worth it. So one thing you'll notice about these 236s is the shield tab here comes out and there's a little bit of a bend, about 15-degree angle right here, and it can actually get pretty close to this solder tab here for the ring. So if it just looks a little bit too close for me, I'll just take some nose pliers and I'll just bend it down a little bit and basically just straighten this out, or even just bend the entire thing down a little bit away from the ring. And this is something I do all the time, is this general, very small modifications to these plugs. Don't always assume just because you take a plug out of the bag that it's exactly how it's supposed to be. I've done all kinds of things like, shorten these strain relief tabs, or just like small, bending parts just a small amount, just to make sure that I have enough clearance between this and an adjacent solder tab or something like that. So if you see something just doesn't look right, don't be afraid to take some needle nose pliers to it and get it where you want it. So I'm just going to tin this up real quick. The soldering iron is hot, and it is, so we're going to do a little bit of solder on for the tip, do a little bit of solder for the ring, and going to do something a little different here. You know how it seems like no matter where you go nowadays, you see advertisements like billboards and that kind of thing. Even on the floor of grocery stores nowadays have advertisements. Kind of, think about that for a minute when we look at this plug. Is when we're going to put these two cables in here, of course we have the tip and the ring, and those are fine, but we also need to have a little bit of space for our shields. Now there's not going to be a ton of room here because we actually have to take two shields and we're going to tie them together and solder them. So you get a pretty big chunk of copper thing that you have to solder up, and it ends up being very close to this ring. But what we can do is we can actually utilize the underside of this for the ground. So instead of tinning the top, I'm actually going to tin this section right here on the bottom. And give yourself a nice big area. Make sure the whole area is clean down there. Okay. Now that's done. Like I said, I already have my cables here. These have already stripped these back 3/4 of an inch. and resist the urge to twist the shield on these immediately. We want to keep it open and we want to keep it flat for right now. So what we want to do is make sure you get these oriented the way you want them before you get them into the strain relief. Okay, so I'm just going to get these side by side, bottom up, and then I'm going to pull both of the shields to one side, and then I'm going to give it a really good twist here just to keep everything neat, and that's it. I'm still going to leave this as a fan for right now. Okay, now what we're going to do is I'm just going to lay them in here, and I want the edge of the outer jacket to come right up here to the strain relief tab, and then we're going to secure it. One side then the other, get nice and close. Don't be shy. Okay, and what we're going to do, let's see here now, there's all kinds of clearance, and I'm not in danger of shorting out my shield to my ring tab. And what we're going to do, because I want this to lie flat. Now the good thing, one of the other things I like about these plugs is when the barrel slides on, there's quite a bit of clearance between the back of this shield tab and the inside of the barrel, which is why this works really well in this plug. Now still, I mean, you could just bind it, you could twist the whole thing, but then you just, you end up just coming off pretty high off the back of this shield tab. So I'm just gonna leave them lay flat. So then put in the vise. Now what you really want to do, you don't want this floating up in the air. So what I like to do, pair of vice grips, not too tight, so it doesn't slip. I'm actually just going to grab all this shield with the vice grips, and I'm just going to let it hang. And all that's going to do is it's going to make sure that the shield stays flush with this surface. Now that that's done, I'm going to come in and solder the shield. I'm going to be pretty generous because I don't want any stray wire. Soldering iron is pretty hot here. Okay, if you don't have vice grips, what you can do is you can use just a standard pair of pliers, not needle nose, but just like regular pliers, and just get a rubber band, wrap it around the handles, just make sure it's tight so they'll stay closed. And once that's done, just come in with your cutters and just cut it nice and flush right up to the edge of the tab. Make sure there's no strays anywhere, like right here. And you're good to go. That's as good a shield connection as you're going to need. Okay. Now, 2 conductors left. And you notice I just left these long. And I talk a lot about prep work, right? And I'm adamant about that. But these I actually like to prep right here on the connector. So what I'm going to do is I'm just going to take a look, and I know I want my installation to come all the way up to the tab and then stop, and I'm going to need, I don't know, just like 3/16 of an inch of wire that's going to go through the little hole, and I'm going to solder it to the tab. So I'm going to cut it just a little bit past, and on something like this, just go a little bit long. Cut it too short, you're out of luck. If you cut it too long, you can always just trim a little bit more off. I'm just going to trim it just, 1/16, maybe 1/8 of an inch past the solder tab. And then from there, you should still have enough room to come in with your strippers, take off what you need. And these ones I will twist up and tin right away. You want to tin these wires as soon as you can so you don't get strays and everything ends up being nice and neat. And it's a lot easier to feed that wire through the hole while it's tinned. Then you're just threading the needle at this point. Use your fingers, or if it's a bit of a pain, like this one is being, just kind of bend it around with a needle nose. Hopefully you didn't cover up that hole when you tinned. Okay. That looks good. And you can always just, because that's tinned, that's going to stay. So I'm just going to push those down. So I make good contact with the tab. And you can always do one before the other. Like it may be easier for you to actually just do the ring and then just kind of get this out of the way. And I'll tell you what, I'm going to redo it just to show you. And I always keep just one of these little clips. So if you want to do something like this, just because it's easier, you can always just clip that out of the way. Then you can solder the ring. Then you have plenty of room. Everything is nice and open. It's visible. Plenty of room for the iron to come in, and you can go back in and you can do the tip. And we'll just do it that way. Okay. That one is done. And that's it. And it's just a matter of, before you get too far, get your barrel with your sleeve. This will be a little tight, but there is plenty of room. Okay, and that's what it's going to look like. So then on the other side, you can do whatever you want. I'm going to do SP400s on this real quick, but you can obviously put any kind of plug you want on that. And then at this point, you may want to talk about labeling these, because if this is a stereo, you're going to want left and right. If it's an insert, you're going to want input and output. There's a lot of ways you can do it. You can heat shrink is good. You can label, you know, just one, put a piece of heat shrink on one, and then you always know that's the right or the left or whatever side you tend to default to. I like to use these pre-printed heat shrink. It says left and right on them, just because I tend to do almost all stereo cables and almost no true insert cables with in and out. You can use 2 different colors, heat shrink, just whatever you want. Lots of things. You can use a standard cable label, whatever you need to do. But make sure, obviously, you always want to make sure that this stuff goes on before you terminate. Get your order of operations correct. So having said that, I'm going to go ahead and get these on and terminate these real quick, and we'll come back and I'm going to show you a couple ways on how to test it. Okay, assembly is done. I've got my 2 SP400 writing on pancakes on there, but obviously you can put whatever you want. And I have my heat shrink with my text on there. Keep the text on the outside so you can read while it's plugged in, because details matter. And we're going to test it. Now, I just use a multimeter for almost all of my testing, just continuity tests. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to start on this end, and I've got basically 4 continuity points over here, 2 tips and 2 shields. I'm just going to go one by one and make sure that I have continuity where I need it, and I don't have continuity where I don't. So you just don't want to always just check, you know, where things are supposed to go. You also always want to make sure you're checking for shorts. So I'm going to start with the tip, which I know is the left. So I should get continuity here, which I do. None on the shield, none on the shield, and none on this tip. Then we go to the ring. I should get continuity here. Okay, none there, and none there. Then you go to the shield. I should get none on this tip, none on this tip, but I should get on both shields, which I do. So everything for this cable is assembled correctly. Now, this just happens to be the right side on the ring. They're not all like this, okay? I know for the Strymon and the RJM, and basically for the cables I make, for the customers I have, this is the way that they expect it to be. Always double check your manuals, your schematics, your pinouts, whatever, and always just make sure that you're terminating this the way that you want it for whatever your device you're building the cable for, okay? So like I said, this is what I need it for, but always just make sure that you're doing it correctly when you build it. And again, I just happen to like this combination with the Mogami 2314 and the Switchcraft 236. If you want to look at some different parts, I did another video about a month or so ago where I looked at 4 or 5 different right angle TRS connectors, any of which you could use for this particular type of cable. I'll have a card to it, so go check that out. And that's all I have for this one. So until next time, take care.